Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here. Man, what a topsy-turvy, crazy, turbulently fun day in the markets. As always, never a dull moment in crypto. I want to bring an update on Bitcoin price action. I'm also going to take a look at some of the other names that have been moving today. Many of them on news. Coinbase adds a bunch of names, and there are a few names that I'm watching for some setups here, mirroring Bitcoin's action a little bit. So clearly Bitcoin is going to drive the overall sentiment, but there's a handful of the altcoins that I'm keeping an eye on here. If you caught my live stream yesterday, we were watching this price action real time. We had the big reversal engulfing candle on the 1 hour chart and the 4 hour charts. Just before the close, this candle really undercut, swept all the stops, and then closed much higher. Failed right below the 10 EMA, so that's something to keep an eye on. And so I want to go into the details behind that and see what to look for next, what to see going into the weekend. And so before we get to that, if you haven't heard, and I'm sure you have, it's been all over the Twitter sphere and everywhere else, but Coinbase announced today that they're going to explore the addition of more assets to Coinbase. Cardano, Basic Attention Token, Stellar Lumens, Zcash, and ZRX. No surprise there, ladies and gentlemen. But the full story here, it is linked in the description below if you want to catch the blog. There are certainly some caveats to take note of here. They listed the names that they are exploring to add. So nothing is official, haven't added any of these names yet. They're kind of giving everybody a heads up, which I think is the right thing to do, as opposed to just surprise, you can now buy Cardano on Coinbase or something along those lines, right? So looking at that kind of going forward, there's a couple of things to really make note of here. Not all of these are ERC20 tokens, as you can see. Obviously, ZRX is, Basic Attention Token is, and so there's going to be some questions around, are these securities? How do we treat these? They also said, you know, you're adding a privacy coin here with Zcash, and so they said there will only be supporting deposits and withdrawals from transparent Zcash addresses. So they're certainly going to make sure that their platform is not being used for any type of money laundering or any type of anonymous transactions, which kind of defeats the purpose of using a Zcash address. But really, the target here is just for investors, for coin holders to be able to buy and sell these easily. Some ways to on-ramp those to alternative coins other than the names that they currently have listed. So they're going to be exploring, you know, regulatory issues and that sort of thing. So nothing here is guaranteed in terms of these will be added, and if they are added, will every jurisdiction be able to have access to all of these? That's still kind of up in the air. But as we saw today in the price charts here, there were some big moves on this news, and it's kind of interesting when you sit back and think about it. There's a lot of exchanges out there, and it's pretty routine for an exchange to add a name, and you know, you see, especially if it's added to like BitHub or Binance, you see the pretty quick pump. But any addition to Coinbase just gets that much more extra attention and excitement around it. And you know, you kind of sit back and think, why, right? Like, what makes Coinbase so special? Why do names that they add pump so hard, and why are people so excited about it? And why are Ripple holders crying because they're not on Coinbase? So, and the reason really is because of the way that Coinbase approaches making cryptocurrency purchases, right? Their goal was to make it a very simple and easy way, a streamlined method of being able to buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. That was their goal. They wanted to be the Gmail of Bitcoin wallets, if you will. And, you know, and it's pretty evident, right? Like, I have a lot of friends who have in recent past taken some exposure up to cryptocurrency, but almost, you know, 50, 60, 70% of the time, right? Folks that are not really trading it day to day or anything like that, just want a little bit of exposure. You know, they don't go the Binance route. They don't go the Kraken route and deposit money and do all that. They almost always go the Coinbase route. It's just the simplest, easiest way to jumpstart, and you can, you know, within, you know, a few minutes, set up an account and buy some Bitcoin, right? And so that's why you get a lot of excitement around these Coinbase additions, because that very large user base will now be looking at these names as potential additions to start buying and adding to their portfolios, right? As opposed to some of the other names that are on exchanges that I mean, for all intents and purposes, require a little bit more work, even though it's not really that much work. You just need an email address, but you know, it just feels a little bit more complicated to, you know, deposit BTC on an exchange and then exchange it for another name. So that's why these Coinbase names tend to see a little bit of a run when there's an announcement or when there's rumor that there's going to be some Coinbase names, because this is going to kind of bring it to the mainstream, if you will, kind of make it to the forefront. And so we'll take a look at these charts here as we go through. I'll take a look at some of these names. Is it worth chasing them? They've had a huge pump already. Some of these were already very strong going into this. And so we'll definitely do a deep dive into each of these names. But first, Bitcoin. Let's take a quick look at the charts here. And so going to the detailed view here, this is the 1 hour chart on Coinbase. And so what I want to point out are a couple of things here. Let me hide these other indicators real quick and just show you the price action that we've seen here. It's been very volatile. It's made for some good trading if you're able to catch these. You had that big reversal and then just kind of overnight, my time, just really sat tight. And then you had another fake out right here where you had the attempt to break out above 6,300 and just failed. Quick reversal. That made for a nice short entry. And you could have just, if you're inclined to do the quick trading, these type of reversal candles, we saw one a few days back at the top here near 6,800 of breakout there. And so you could have had a quick, you know, couple percent on trading if you're doing that sort of thing. And so I was looking for a little bit of a secondary dip. So if you caught the live stream yesterday, there was 2 levels that I pointed out, and they still are important levels to be watching here going into the weekend. The first level on the upside was that $6,300 range, right? That was a significant price point in the structure that has been established over the last 2 weeks. If you look at this price pattern that I'm watching here, this potential inverse head and shoulders that may be forming here, we might be seeing the right shoulder form. Throughout this price structure, 6,300 has been a significant level. You saw it back here, you saw it right here, you saw the breakout throwback right to the 6,300, and then we saw this consolidation most recently that bounced in and around 3,600 or 6,300, excuse me, before finally breaking lower. And so now that it's broken below it, it's going to now act as an area of resistance. So on the way up, that's going to be a key level to watch. And then, of course, ultimately getting above 6,400. And so that was the price point I was watching. You saw this little bit of a fake out. It looked like it was going, and it didn't last. Almost immediately, it pulled right back in, and then a lot of the selling pressure showed up. That's actually a positive thing near term, because what I was hoping to see was a little bit of a retest of this low that was established yesterday. And so that was right around 60.70. So just below 6,100 is the wick, the bottom of that wick there. And so I wanted to see a test of that, but we don't want to see that taken out to the downside. So on the downside, that's the level to be watching. It needs to stay above this 60.70 mark, and it's okay if it pulls back here and kind of establishes a little bit of a base. I expected there to be some volatility following this pullback, so we're seeing that, but as long as it holds above this here over the next couple of days, that will keep this potential inverse head and shoulder pattern in play. And so that's what I'm going to be watching here. Let me clear these lines real quick. So looking at the pattern here, you have the left shoulder, you have the right shoulder, and then a potential right shoulder forming there. So, excuse me, left shoulder, head, potential right shoulder forming. It's also important to note that, you know, at the daily level, looking at the daily chart, the last week certainly has been bearish. So let's not forget about that, right? In the big picture, we're still very much in a broader downtrend. And in the last week, we're still very much bearish, right? There's been one green day out of the last 6 days. And so you have to keep that in mind. This is just a potential reversal pattern that's forming. It will be very bullish if it completes the pattern and breaks above this 6,800 line. But until that happens, you got to remain cautious and you got to just be a little patient and wait for this thing to play out. Now that we've had this wick and we've had this retest, that's positive. In my last video update, not the live stream yesterday, but the day before that, I was talking about some key Fibonacci levels to watch on the pullback. 6,300 was that 50% retracement. Just around 6,200 was the 618 level, and so far we're bouncing in and around that. So it's also another key level to be watching. If it starts to get much deeper than that, below 6K, then in my opinion, this pattern is going to really be invalidated at that point. So it really just needs to hold here And over the next couple of days, we want to see this thing start drifting higher, moving to the upside, and then retesting some resistance here going into $6,700, $6,800. Now beyond Bitcoin, there's a few other names. I'm going to show some USD tether pairs of these names that are potentially forming reversal patterns by themselves. It's some of the stronger names on the list that I'm keeping an eye on. So the first one here on the list is EOS. And so EOS USD pair has been drifting lower. I showed the Binance or the Bitfinex chart yesterday, and that $7 area in and around there has been a key area to be watching. Right now we're forming a potential double bottom here on this chart as it starts to pull in. You're seeing the RSI trying to hold higher, trying to hold the same level as this thing pulls in. So this is just a pattern I'm watching. Certainly there's nothing actionable here yet. If it cuts below yesterday's low, that's going to be negative. So I'd like to see this thing reverse here and start to move up the right side. Officially, it will confirm when it breaks out above, let's call it $9, and that'll be a confirmed double bottom if we start to move higher. But a reversal pattern that I'm keeping an eye on here. Looking at NEO. So NEO was one of the stronger names off the low. About a week and a half ago, we had a very strong move, about 60% from end to end, and we've since seen a pretty good pullback. And now I'm looking for a higher low to be established here. And so I'm keeping an eye on NEO here. It'll look much stronger if we can get above this 10 EMA on the daily charts. So getting above $35 or so will certainly start to round the corner, but we won't get confirmation that that was a higher low until we actually can clear this $40 mark. But look at what that would also form, right? There's a similar pattern here starting to form. If we get that right shoulder forming, you have another significant reversal pattern showing up on NEO. So you're starting to see more of these show up. Some volume is increasing here near the lows. So there's certainly a battle between the bulls and the bears here. Next one on the list was Ontology. So Ontology is very oversold versus BTC. If you look at the BTC pair, again, very similar price action, oversold here. So I'm just keeping an eye out from that perspective. Zooming in here, looking at a little bit more detail, going to the 4-hour chart. Shorter time frame, so not as strong of a pattern, but very similar pattern as well, right? So a potential pattern I'm watching. Like I keep saying potential because I want to make it clear that there's no confirmation yet that these have reversed, but you always want to look ahead, right? You always want to see what's the potential next step that the market's going to be taking. And so that's what I'm looking for here. I'm looking at, hey, is this a potential reversal? And if we start to round the corner, then I'm looking for a breakout above that 350, 360 mark, and that'll form a small inverse head and shoulder on the 4-hour chart. And then that'll give it a run to the upside, which will test the 10 EMA on the daily chart. So that's how I look at things. I start kind of preempting the next move, but you don't necessarily need to take action on it. You just kind of try to anticipate what are the potential options here. And if it clearly if it moves lower here and it starts to drop below this 320 mark, then that just invalidates that pattern. Then you start looking for a different approach at that point. And one more is BNB, Binance Coin. I've been looking at the bigger picture of this name here just because it's fully retraced and pulled right back to a significant price point here. You can see this 1170, 1160 mark has been a key price point over the last couple of months, and so it'll be interesting to see if it can finally hold here. If you go to the BTC pair, BNB is also right back at the breakout point following that to break out to new highs versus Bitcoin a couple of months ago. And so this is a key point that if it's going to reverse, this is ideally where you'd like to see a little bit of a bounce show up and some buying support show up here. So BNB is one I'm keeping an eye on because of that perspective there. Let's take a look at some of these Coinbase names that have been added. Should you chase these pumps? Looking at Cardano. Cardano had a big move higher. Going to that 4-hour chart, you can see once the news came out, there was also a big wick. So a lot of sellers showed up here taking profits on that move. I mean, that was a pretty good move in about an hour and a half or so, about 14% for Cardano. Going to the big picture here on the daily, a little bit of a double bottom forming now because of this. I know it was news driven, so you always have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because this was not necessarily organic buying, if you will. It wasn't purely market forces. It was news driven, and so that does change it a little bit. But strictly looking at the technicals, just looking at the chart here, there is a little bit of a double bottom forming now, and clearly there's going to be bigger volume coming in on this last move because that was such a quick news driven pump, and you'll get confirmation if it can close above this neckline. But for now, a lot of these names, just got to see if this pullback holds or if it completely gives up the move. Oftentimes, that's what you see when there is a news-driven event, you see that initial reaction, but it doesn't sustain, and it just tends to drift lower and then give up the entire move completely. The thing with these names that's going to be a little interesting is Coinbase announced that they are exploring these names as potential additions. It's not like the news is out there officially, we've been added and they're done. In that case, you'd see the quick reaction and most likely the sell-off, kind of the sell the news scenario. In this case, I'm looking at potential front running and some more upside price action as the news makes the rounds. Not everyone is fully aware of this yet. And so you could see continued price action going forward until the official announcement is made that these names will be added. So something to be aware of here, that they are potential additions, but because it's not official yet, some of these names may continue to see some upward momentum. Certainly the technicals on the daily chart support it. This is very near the lows. You have the RSI that's nowhere near overbought conditions. In fact, it's still very much in the bearish zone. And so if this thing wanted to, it certainly has room to run to the upside before it gets very extended. Near term, yes, absolutely, they got extended. In the short run, that's because of that quick move it had on the 1 hour chart. So just something to keep an eye on there. Looking at the next one, ZRX. Now this one's long been rumored to be the next addition to Coinbase. Looks like those rumors are proven to be true now. ZRX has been one of the stronger names anyway. We had the big rally here going into May, and during the pullback, it didn't fully retrace like many of these other names did. So ZRX certainly held up its own. And then here recently, we're seeing that higher daily low. I covered this in the live stream yesterday, has certainly been high on the watch list because it's just been one of the stronger names in the market during this recent pullback. And now we're seeing some strong volume. This one's not pulling in quite as much as Cardano is, so it's really sustaining. I think ZRX has a really good shot of being one of those names that finally get added to Coinbase. Next up, Basic Attention Token. Again, another name that has already been very strong. Look at the weekly chart of this guy here. Just has been forming this big symmetrical triangle. Now it has officially broken out with this news announcement. So that is a clear break of that pattern. Going to the daily chart, I was also watching a smaller pattern forming here on this daily. I know some of the folks in my group have already been trading this one here just because it's been giving you some signals at the earlier time frames. And so this one just continues to be one of the stronger names, was already one of the leading names in this market here in recent weeks. And this is just confirmation. Now you're seeing that breakout to the upside. And this was not giving up the move very much compared to some of these other names. You had the big pull, you had the big move, very little pullback, and now it's moving higher. So Basic Attention, absolutely one of the stronger names. But like most of these, I was cautioned that this is a little bit extended now. And so if you're trading these type of things, you want to be looking for secondary entries as opposed to chasing these. Next on the list was Zcash. And so Zcash was a little bit of a surprise to me, honestly. I didn't expect Coinbase to pick one of the privacy names as one of the first ones they'd be adding here. But Zcash was listed. Now it's already on many other exchanges, as you all know. And you saw this big wick, a lot of profit taking showing up there. Going to the 1 hour chart. There was a big move though. This was a nice reaction on Zcash. You can see that was a 23% move to the upside. And right now it's retracing that a little bit here. So be interesting to see if they follow suit on this, considering the fact that it's already on so many other exchanges. I would not be surprised if this was one of the names that gets officially announced as added and tradable. And so Zcash had that big move, big reversal candle here on the daily chart following that news there. And obviously the volume here has been above average, not quite as big as the Gemini pump when they added that to the exchange, but still a pretty good move on Zcash. And last but not least, Stellar Lumens, looking very good here, forming a nice little double bottom, some above average volume here as we come into the close. This daily bar has about 20 minutes left at the time of this recording, and you can see Stellar has held the gains. Very strong move off of that announcement there, about 12%, and right now just sitting tight, letting that moving average catch up. And so Stellar Lumens is looking pretty good here. And you know, I want to make an interesting point here, and I don't say this to pat myself on the back or to do anything along those lines, but I say this because it proves a point that the charts very often will give you information or will give you clues that some news is coming or some names are much stronger than others before the actual announcement. Now, I'm not saying that there's been insider trading or anything like that, so don't misread me, but it's very interesting that I posted a watch list to my Slack group earlier today, and it was about 10 names or so on the watch list, and it's very interesting that every single one of the Coinbase names, every single one of these 5 names was on my watch list. And this is well before the news, and I have no inside information. The point is that the technicals were there. The charts were showing relative strength. They were showing that these names were holding up best, were already moving strongly off the lows, were setting up patterns, and so that's why they made the list. And so it's very interesting that, hey, these names that have been one of the stronger ones and were on the watch list today were all listed. I mean, every single one of these was on the list, so it's just kind of surprising to see that, and it just goes to show you confirmation that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, all these lines and these candlesticks that we're looking at here, it's price action, but it paints a picture of more than just price action. This is market psychology. This tells you where the buyers and the sellers are showing up, what's strong, what's in favor, what's out of favor, and that's what makes trading possible if you're trading, because at the end of the day, we're trading, yeah, we're looking at candlesticks and all that, but really what we're doing is we're trading buy and sell points. You're looking at where buyers and sellers are showing up. You're looking at supply and demand. You're looking at sentiment changes. And that's really, at the end of the day, what technical analysis is. It's using these price points and past precedents and historical patterns to put the probabilities in your favor. And it's not about predictions. It's not about being 100% right or 100% wrong. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're 100% right or 100% wrong, because you go based on what the market tells you and you react accordingly. So just an interesting point there. And I found it curious that every single one of those names was on the list when I pointed them out this morning. So going back to Bitcoin one more time, just another thing to keep an eye on here. So just to rehash and summarize here, look at yesterday's low as the must-hold level here going into the weekend. And if we can close above this $6,400 mark and get above that 10 EMA on the daily chart over the next couple of days, that would really be positive and start to show that, hey, maybe we are going to see this right shoulder form. Otherwise, a move lower below yesterday's low, then we'll likely see a retest of the most recent lows around 5,800 or so. And in that scenario, I don't expect it to hold. I would most likely see a cut lower below that $5,800 mark. So that's what I'm going to be looking at going into the weekend. I hope this summary helped, guys. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for subscribing. And until next time, take care, everyone.